Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Scottish Rugby podcast, brought to you by the Scottish Rugby blog. Well, the country is in turmoil once again. Controversy has swamped number 10. Some say his position is untenable, and some time it's probably time for him to step aside and sooner rather than later, and let others have their chance at the big position. But we'll get on to Blair Kinghorn later, Craig. Hashtag
Sorry, my nice satire. I'm just back inside from being out on my doorstep clapping for Boris.
I
think it helps, apparently. So
it's it does, yeah.
Magnificent thought. Just I've got this vision of you just out on your doorstep with a pot,
pan and a potty spoon.
Wooden spoon going to town.
I don't know what my neighbours are really upset. I don't know what the problem is.
I know. It's like Fairies. I think it's the same principle as Fairies. If you clap your hands hard enough, a nurse does a little bit better about a job.
Absolutely.
Doesn't get a pay rise, but
no.
In my professional capacity, I can confirm categorically this is not the case. And if any of my nursing colleagues are watching tonight, I'm sorry.
So if I say that nurses don't exist, one doesn't die. Is that what you're saying, John?
Yes.
It's not the same principles as Fairies.
It's not the same principles as Fairies, no.
I'm pleased to hear that. Stop removing Johnny. Let him in.
No, I think
I timed that spectacularly, didn't I? I think it was me that removed myself, actually.
I was adding you in, and then you were removing yourself, Johnny. That's what's happening. There we go. Anyway, we're all here now. As you've heard, I'm joined this evening by John Anderson, Johnny McGinty, and Craig Manson. Good evening, all.
Good evening.
Hello.
Right, 5 minutes into the podcast, and I've done the introductions. You just missed my Blair Kinghorn satire, Johnny, but we'll return that later in the podcast, probably. So, if you are watching us live, we are currently on Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. You can also watch us on our Patreon-only live stream as well, and you get bonus weekly content if you sign up to our Patreon, patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast. You can download the podcast in audio format as well on anywhere that you can get audio podcasts, like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, anywhere like that. So this evening, we've got, we'll start with some news, shall we? Craig, Edinburgh have got a new defence coach.
We do. We have Michael Todd coming from the Queensland Reds. So just to start the Weege contingent moaning that we get looked after before they do. We sign a quality defence coach, so it'll be interesting to see how he goes. Well, John, I know it's yet to be proven whether he flies over here and he is quite as quality as you think, but because the Queensland Reds haven't been as good a team really as but he's obviously thought of well.
Was that not where Matt Taylor came from?
It was where Steve Tandy came from as well, though.
Yeah.
And I mean,
and that'll be obvious. It's obviously Steve Tandy that's kind of maybe been involved. Do you think
that'll be that Scotland defence that's shipping points like they're going out of fashion as well? So cool, good choice, Craig. Good choice.
You really can't work an angle on anything, can't you?
The thing is, though, I mean, it's an interesting appointment in that, and I don't want to get all Glasgow Edinburgh about it, but Glasgow have been recruiting from, I would say within, but promoting from within young Scottish coaches, which on the one hand you could say is a good thing because it develops young Scottish coaches. The other way of looking at it, John, to get your wee green face on, is that Glasgow or the SRU aren't investing as much money in the Glasgow coaching setup as Edinburgh are investing, because he won't have come cheap.
Yeah, I think that's fair. In terms of that would be the premise that a lot of fans would look at. But I think it's safe to say, right? So Edinburgh promoted their head coach from within. So that's fair. Mike Blair was an unproven head coach when he went to take the big job at Edinburgh, and he's done really well. So I think it does go both ways, and you'll be surprised at my lack of jumping on top of this and being like, it's all a conspiracy. But I think fair play to Edinburgh. If they've got a good coach there, great. I think Glasgow have kind of identified that there's there's internal candidates that might be the best people for the job. Although I still despair at the idea of Pete Murchie teaching defence. But I mean, he might be the only person available actually for Edinburgh as well in terms of the candidates that are there. And Edinburgh have had their fill of SRU appointed coaches with, we'll go back to Duncan Hodge, and you probably do deserve a few marquee signings for putting up with Hodge for 5 years or so. So fair play to you, but I still think it's a unproven signing. And when you are as porous as SpongeBob next year, it's going to be hilarious.
Well, the thing is, we've got to spend the Glasgow season ticket money somehow. So
yeah, I mean, I heard there's about 7 or 8 season tickets have been renewed. So yeah,
I mean, it's and they're that expensive. The 7 or 8,
exactly.
Yeah.
The Harrods of season tickets.
Speaking of Glasgow, I was surprised that Pat MacArthur's gone to Ayrshire Bulls, and I was convinced, and I may have got this wrong, that Pat MacArthur was coaching at Glasgow, but he hasn't been. I don't know. I've just got him and Pete Murchie mixed up.
Yeah, no. Pat went to when Pat left Glasgow, he took some time off rugby, and yeah, he
was at Ayrshire Bulls, I think, in an assistant capacity. He stepped up the main role.
Coaching there before.
Yeah.
He was, with Pete Murchie, I think, and then Pete Murchie went up and
coach.
Pete Horn. He was head coach before Pete Horn took over, and now he's back to being head coach again.
Is that right?
Yeah,
right.
I think so.
So yeah, no, it's not really a surprise, and I think the only thing that's quite surprising about that is obviously we still talk about the 6 months for Pete Horn at Super 6 level, and it's like, yeah, you're getting a promotion, son. I am a big advocate for if you're good enough, you are old enough, experienced enough, etc., etc. So I think, if someone saw what they like and got the job, fair play.
Yeah, I mean, Ayrshire Bulls did quite well under Pete Horn, I guess. I mean, it's not... He wasn't exactly taking over like Boroughmuir. Do you know what I mean? The kind of nuts and bolts were already there, but they did all right in the Super 6 sprint, Johnny.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing with Pete Horn is that was basically the first bit of coaching he'd ever done was to be head coach of Ayrshire Bulls. So I think in a lot of ways it probably makes sense for him, even though Glasgow obviously has a bigger job, to come back and do skills coach and kind of get used to the idea of coaching.
He has been coaching for some time though.
Bits and pieces, but not like a proper full-time coaching job.
Mm.
So for your first full-time coaching job to be a head coach, even if it is in Super 6, it's a big jump and it's a big change. So getting a bit of full-time coaching experience at Glasgow, maybe you'll end up back at the Super 6 once he's done a bit more of it, or maybe they just saw him do it for a couple of months and went, oh, actually, he knows what he's doing. We'll just get him back to a pro team. We will wait and see.
Yeah. Other news is I'm just asking questions. Adam Ash has taken up a coaching role at Stirling County, the one that Scott Lawson, I think, had. I hadn't realised that he'd retired from due to an injury. I thought it was just that the Giltinis weren't allowed to play rugby anymore, and that's why
he's also not as old as I thought he was. He retired at 28. I kind of thought he'd be coming towards the end of his career anyway, to be honest. I thought it was like, there's no point looking for another job, retiring at 28.
Neck injury, that's what sitting in front of conspiracy theory videos on YouTube will do to you.
Yeah.
It gives you a crick in your neck that you get stuck like this.
I think Stirling's going to be a perfect place for him because, the Stirling Bulls, and you'll get dream catchers and everything put up, and you'll fit in really well down there.
Yeah. Very good.
You'll have one of those jackets with the have you not seen those jacket with the wolves on the back?
Do you know what? That's what Stirling County need. I know you're a big fan of the Stirling County stash, Johnny, but you know those T-shirts that you see on Amazon if you type wolf and moon?
Like the ones you used to get in shops. Remember in shops that used to be in the middle of shopping centres, and there was always a shop that sold like a purple tie-dye T-shirt with a big wolf and a moon on it.
Looked like a meatloaf cover.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what the Stirling County training kit needs to be next season. And you can have that idea for free, but I want I want to train and invest.
But I
in
want
return.
one.
Well, we were going to try and get the Super Six stash.
Well, yeah, we should say if
competition.
we've Johnny's already expressed his love of the Stirling County wool stash. You know, I'm obviously I wouldn't say no to the my Southern Knights. So we're happy to review Super Six stash. If any franchises want to send us some stash our way, we'll happily review it and wear it on the podcast.
I mean, I've got a massive group of tops in there, and I'm happy to review the Ayrshire Bulls against any of those.
Are your allegiances up for grabs here, John? That's what I'm
absolutely, yeah. I mean,
because I think, you know, I'm already pretty committed. But you saying you could be bought by who sends you the most stash?
I think like in true Super Six style, I can be bought. Just like the franchises were. So, you know, like
Start your bidding process now.
See, I was hoping you were just going to go for Ayrshire Bulls. Then I get the chance of like three teams that might find something in their kit that actually like fits me.
Well, there's a challenge, isn't it? There's a challenge for all the franchises, Craig, isn't it?
Yeah.
If all 6 franchises send their biggest bit of kit to Craig, we'll see who the winner is.
Yeah.
I've seen some of the lads that played for Boroughmuir last season. You'll know struggle.
You'll be fine, Craig. You'll be fine. some big boys in there.
There was some big boys last season. I don't know if there's any other news. Nobody's signed contracts that I can remember seeing. Glasgow still haven't got a head coach.
Nah, we don't need one. We're just going to let the players coach.
Gotta go Harlequin style.
That's it.
Coaching by committee.
That's it.
That's essentially how the government's been run now.
Hey.
Hashtag satire. At what point does it become a problem for Glasgow? Because it's probably not a problem now. 4 weeks ago.
4 weeks ago, when the season ticket renewals came out, that's when it became a problem.
Well, Dragons launched their rebrand last week at their first day of pre-season. So, if there are other teams in pre-season already.
There's a difference between a rebrand, though, and we do need a whole new structure at the top.
But if other teams have started pre-season, then
true,
Glasgow not having a coach is a problem.
It's a massive problem. No, I take your point. Yeah, no, you're right. Although one of our more successful coaches didn't turn up for pre-season, so you know. Maybe we just need Kenny Murray to come back and lead pre-season, and then Scott Robertson will turn up in October, and we'll be fine.
Awesome.
Sure. You write that in your dream journal, John.
I've messaged Adam.
Stick in your hope chest.
I've messaged Adam Ash about it, and we're going to have a podcast about it.
His penny pocket diary.
We're going to attract him with some really, really interesting business propositions.
You can tell him how easy it is to break dance on 4G.
4G, that's for losers, mate. 5G. I don't know if you get 5G in Stirling. Maybe that's why he's moved there.
Anyway, let's move on. Should we talk about? Do you want to talk about the under-20s?
I mean, we should. Right. Let's. But we're not doing this like joyously. We don't want to do this, but we have to. Yeah,
we don't normally have time to talk about the under-20s. Just with, we try and keep the main podcast to an hour, and sometimes there's just too much rugby to watch, so it falls by the wayside. But it's still not going well. I still can't tell if this is the after effects of COVID. Right. The way that the pathways work in Scotland is that all the lads that are coming through now would have been 16, 17 when COVID hit. So wouldn't have maybe not even have been in the academy systems or on the fringes of it. So had 2 years to 18 months of club training as and when it was available, and now are being asked to play under 20s. Whereas the other teams that we're playing against now, maybe start them in academy. I don't know, maybe have start them in the academies younger.
I mean, it's a valid question, Cammy. I don't know. Unfortunately, the evidence is, the thing with age grade rugby is that it's by its very nature, it's limited by age ranges, and I think Scotland have notoriously been bad at developing players at a younger age. If you think about when players make their debut, young players make their debut, it tends to be a couple of years after the other countries. Like think about Wales and obviously George North at 18, and think that's not a unique situation for Wales. But then you're looking at guys like Adam Hastings coming through at Scotland, great prospect at the time, and it was like he's 23 when he's making his debut.
Adam Hastings didn't come through the Scottish system.
He didn't come through the academy. No, you're right, and I just think it's maybe a Scottish mentality that we don't actually put trust in. It's back to what I said right at the start. If you're good enough, you're old enough, and I think that's not necessarily came through in Scottish rugby yet. And the counter issue to that is that I don't think our young players are necessarily. Yeah, we're not developing people quickly enough, and as such, under 20s get smashed.
We're not physically developing them quickly enough is the most glaring problem. They're giving away kilos to every single player across the pitch in every game so far, and Georgia just blew them off the ball at every possible opportunity yesterday.
Yeah,
like the strengthening, whatever's going on with the strength and conditioning seems like it's nothing, to be honest. It's like basically non-existent. You look at condition of the Scottish
player.
But I wonder whether or not, Craig, I wonder how much of that is a welfare issue. And there is a bit of a, do we want to be a country that are, putting our under 20s through, punishing regimes just to be good at under 20 level? Because there might be something to said for other countries are putting their players through a ringer at a young age that they shouldn't be, and maybe we shouldn't be playing catch up, Craig, with that and just doing our own thing.
I think there's a fundamental issue with how the process works. However, because if you look at all the school teams, we're in a. Well, I can only talk from my experience, but you're seeing kids coming through a system. And for example, if you look at Bell Baxter, for example, which is the school that feeds the Howe works with and produced Pete Horn, George Horn, Chris Fazaro, etc. in that wonder team. Well, George wasn't, but the issue you have is that that particular non-private school survived and worked well because they had a PE teacher there who enjoyed rugby and was and so the funding came in from the SRU and it was spent on rugby and it was pushed. The problem you have now is that, for example, at Bell Baxter, that particular teacher left and was replaced by someone who likes football. So it then just shifted and there is some rugby played at Bell Baxter School, but and I'm talking about Bell Baxter School. They're not the only ones. There'll be many schools all over Scotland exactly the same. So we're missing out. If you look at the funnel is being all automatically decreased at the top because you're now only selecting and really only selecting from private schools because. For example, we have players that have come through our system and then they go up to age grade rugby of 16, 17 and they're offered a scholarship to go to a private school. And the issue you then have is they then go from, they were a player with us, they've come through the system, they've worked with our team, they've been working with these coaches, doing this, that and the other, and then automatically they're spirited away, shoved in a gym 5 or 6 days a week, and told to get, and sometimes moved position, and there's been no discussion between club and other school, and it's all disjointed, and I think it's for me, we are bringing the funnel very, very tight, whereas we're not opening out. If we had more and more schools with rugby involved with the schools, and I know that they're trying to do something about it, but think you'll get more and more players coming through, talented players like Finn Russell, for example, who didn't come through a private school pathway and was discovered. And I think we tend to take our eye off the ball and then pump these boys through a certain specific way, and they're not being exposed to other types of rugby, if you know what I mean. I don't know if I'm being clear.
That's Finn Russell's talked about that, hasn't he? That he kind of he had a life, he had a career and stuff, and then he was picked up. And there is an element. I think there is not every kid develops at the same rate and at the same time. So you can't write kids off at 16 because they have. I mean, I've talked about it myself. At 16 I was 5'10". And I stopped playing rugby because I kind of felt I was I was better in the forwards. I can't run for toffee, and I was fine in the forwards, but I felt 5'10". I was far too small to play in the forwards anymore. So I gave up I just gave up. A year later, I was 6'1", and I think that kind of period from 15, 16 onwards, you can go through different developments at different rates, and players can get left. I mean, I'm not saying I would have been a good rugby player. I would have been awful, but there's plenty of other players who... I mean, Darcy Graham's an example, isn't it? That Darcy Graham has had to fight his way to get to where he is because he was written off. He talks about being written off by his coaches because he was too small.
So there's an element of self-fulfilling prophecies about all this as well, because I think the private school thing you bring up, Craig, is very important. We look at other successful rugby nations, people who've done professionalism correctly. And, ultimately you've got talented players being then fast-tracked into, private schools where they then play against other private schools. They play a lot of rugby, and all of a sudden they're the best players to go on and represent, when actually, as you rightly say, Cam, development happens at a different rate. So a person who's not identified at 14 as being maybe the most talented rugby player in their school, who doesn't get the scholarship to go off, they get lost to the game, or potentially get lost to the game, when actually the potential they've got, they might have been a better player. And I think the academies are a good starting point, but ultimately... And I don't want to be that guy that's saying private school's bad. But ultimately, if you've got a situation where guys are being fast-tracked into positions where they're going to be exposed to a lot of rugby, and we know that exposure to rugby at that age does develop you, helps you become a better player, but the opportunities are not there for everyone. And I just think we are really missing the trick by not having, almost like thinking about like the French football. To use a different analogy, French football, it's all kind of, academy based, in that every potential prospect in the country has the opportunity to go and be part of this academy potentially. And we have such dwindling player numbers at youth level. The fact we're almost excluding people seems bizarre.
I think also, it's a mixture of two things. Obviously, I know the two boys, for example, that I know that have gone, and I think there's a third now that are going and getting their scholarship. First things first, I would never ever stand in their way, and
of course not. Of course
and
not.
I've said to them, go for it, go on, and if I can help you in any way, go do it, because it's they're going to be open to a whole new level or a whole new life.
They'll become better players for it. That's a fact.
Absolutely. And even if they don't become better players, they get a year of high quality education. They get their eyes open to different things, and it's a life experience. My issue is that, and I have to be very careful here, because I know that some of the rugby coaches that are involved in the private schools are incredibly talented, are incredibly good with the boys and the girls now, and I'm not taking anything away from them. But you're also, if you're taking from these schools, you're also stopping the access to players to different coaches. They're all in a very they're in that coaching style. Whereas there's a myriad of talented coaches across Scotland that help in different ways and open the players' eyes to different things. And you tends to be very much, it becomes more closed, you know.
Every coach I've played under, I've learned something different from. And you're absolutely right. You don't necessarily get that breadth of experience by going into a system that is, it's not the same, but it is, it's a private school. It's a coach who's probably done the same pathway. I take your point. I think you're absolutely right. Like players, I think if we want players to have a well-balanced, well-rounded approach to the game, then exposure to different places, different coaches, different environments, probably even in a non-competitive manner, where they're just learning the game, is so important. So it's a really valid point, Craig.
I can't. Who was the player? It's bothering me now. It was a back row for Edinburgh that was talking about this. How he'd struggled and had to fight every inch of the way to get into the Edinburgh squad because he hadn't come through the school system. And I can't remember. It's not Luke Crosby. Somebody else in the back row a couple of seasons ago was talking about this kind of publicly, about the fact that the selectors were, the selectors for the age grade teams and the representative teams are all from the same clubs. And they're all from the same schools, and they all pick the players from the same clubs and the same schools. And I can't remember who it was now. And the name escapes me. It's going to bug me all night.
It's right in my head. It's in my head too. I know exactly who you're talking about, but I don't know. The name's not there.
No, I want to say Luke Crosby, but no, it's not Luke Crosby.
I'm working on it, guys. I'll see if I can find it.
Good. See if you can find it, John. But yeah, it's not. It's not ideal, the current system. And I think Kenny Murray's kind of come out and said it's not just the under-20 group, it's the whole performance pathway that needs looking at.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's look. We're half an hour in. Should we talk about the Argentina game now? I've put off long enough.
I hope Johnny's got notes, because I believe he was on another podcast and he made notes for that podcast.
No, I didn't make notes. I said I should make notes. Maybe I wouldn't make so many mistakes if I do make notes.
Key difference. No, you would make just as many mistakes, buddy. I promise. Last time I was on the podcast that Craig's talking about, I decided I was going out of my way to be nice about Edinburgh, and it was the week of the URC quarterfinal, and I said how great Edinburgh's back row has been, and I said in particular Connor Boyle was great. Now, Connor Boyle's been really good all year, but he wasn't in the 23 for the quarterfinal. I was thinking about Luke Crosby, and I said Connor Boyle. So maybe I should just start writing a little bit down. That's the last time I tried to be nice about Edinburgh. That was your key mistake, mate.
That's fine. Blood and Mud. Blood and Mud. Most people that listen to Blood and Mud are from Wales anyway, so you'll be fine, Johnny.
Connor Boyle. He sounds like a Welshman.
That's how you sounded Cockney, John.
You don't.
I know. I'm not the accents guy here.
Yeah. So, did we learn anything from that game, Craig?
Funnily enough, John Anderson's just disappeared, and I don't know whether he's giggling behind the silence there. I don't think I think we've absolutely learned nothing. I take it back. I think we've learned two things. Matt Fagerson is a strong ball carrier going forward, and he did a very, very good job, and was one of a very, very few players that did a good job on that on the weekend.
What
and
have
I
you
think
done with the real Craig?
Sorry?
I said, what have you done with the real Craig?
Don't worry about it. The real Craig will come back in a minute. But and also I think Rory Hutchison should be involved with the Scotland squad and moving forward. I have my own thoughts on it, and I'm sure we'll share them. And they're probably very, very similar to everyone else here. But I don't think he's even at 15, he looked very, very Rory Hutchison-esque, and he was doing everything that we thought he would do. So I was pleased with his performance. But unfortunately, Scotland looked underdone, underprepared, jet lagged, rusty, whatever you want to call it. They did not perform very well on the weekend.
I mean, the forwards in particular. I mean, I know you mentioned kind of Matt Ferguson there, Craig, but Johnny, the forwards in particular just seem to be missing something, and I don't know. It's hard. I mean, it was interesting that was it? I think it was Rory in the group chat today was saying kind of put the post like Magnus Bradbury was playing.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, and we've talked about this with Magnus Bradbury before, is he looks fantastic for Edinburgh and does an absolutely amazing job. And Magnus Bradbury has looked amazing for Scotland in the past, but does tend to kind of fade away. And I think we know that our strongest position, particularly in the forwards, is in the back row. You can a lot of our game plan is built around in defence, the back row disrupting quick ball from the opposition and protecting ball when we're on the attack. And when it's not functioning and when players are quiet, you can see why everything just falls apart, because you just can't get tempo into the attack and you can't disrupt and it allows the opposition to get tempo into their attack.
Yeah, and like we've said about Magnus Bradbury loads of times before, when Magnus Bradbury plays well, Scotland play well. But I'm now beginning to think that when Scotland are playing well, Magnus Bradbury plays well, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like if everything's going well, he's a really, really good player to have on the team. When everything's not going so well, you know, like Rory was saying, he kind of fades into the background a little bit. It will be interesting to see how this weekend goes, because it's obviously a big change in the back row. To be honest, for months I've been saying I think that we've chosen a better way of doing our summer tour than everybody else, because we've given some senior players some time off. We haven't picked as high level an opposition. You know, like we're not playing 3 tests against South Africa or New Zealand or whatever. So by the same token, I struggle to get too worked up about it.
Yeah.
But at the same time,
I love that you think that was our choice, Johnny. It was our choice. We chose to go and play Argentina rather than they were the only team that would have us.
I think ours was announced first, was it not?
Yeah,
it doesn't necessarily mean that.
Yeah, it's John. What was you learn anything?
Yeah, I mean, I watched it, and there was a lot of things kind of stood out to me in terms of attitude, desire. You know, I think people were quite quick to jump on the players, but actually altitude played a huge part in it as well. And you know, the guys, Glasgow and Edinburgh fans who've seen their teams go to altitude games and seen the way players can struggle at that, I think, you know, to say they're underdone, I think isn't totally fair. I think, you know, the altitude will have played a huge part in that. And I think, you know, the guys are obviously not going to be playing a World Cup at altitude next year. So there's no reason for them to be prepped for it, as opposed to previous World Cup where the summer before we went to Japan and we played in sweltering heat in Japan and we had it all sussed out, and then we absolutely rooked it come World Cup time. So it's a really difficult one. I think what we've learned is the same characters flatter to deceive in Scotland shirts. I think the positional decisions are absolutely bonkers. And again, it's a development tour, and I think that's we have to really phrase it as that now. It's clearly a development tour. We're not talking about a fully fledged summer tour here. So it'll be really interesting to see. Guys have obviously had a week to work on a lot of, you know, we hear a lot from the Scotland squad about, you know, it's the old catchphrase that we all hate about, yeah, we know what went wrong and we're going to work on it through. And the boys have trained well through the week, and we've heard all that crap come out as well. So let's see. The proof of the pudding's Saturday night, and I think everyone needs a vastly improved Scotland performance. Because let's be honest, they were desperate at the weekend. They were really poor.
Yeah, and there was the positional things an interesting, and it's I struggle with positional stuff because I don't. It's hard to know from watching it whether or not it's a coaching problem or a player problem. So if you're standing where you're told to stand by your coach, then that's not necessarily your fault. Although,
but you can only stand where a coach can only get you so far. So Hutchinson with four games at fullback in his career, there's no way he's going to be able to. Look at. You always talk about experience in a position. Just guys who are 30 years of age, have played fullback all their days. They know where to be. They just know. And Hutchinson is not going to be that, and he's not going to play there at his club level. So what are we doing?
I think though that Hutchinson is a bit of a. I think Hugh Jones was on the tour, along with Ollie Smith, and that was your fullback and that was your backup fullback. And with Hugh Jones getting injured, I think Hutchinson has been put in the fullback.
Why would you not put Ollie Smith in there then?
Well, honestly, mate, I don't know.
I know.
Because I'm, and I'm sure we'll get to the 10 position in a minute. But I certainly would have rather have seen Ollie Smith if this is a development to it. I would far rather have seen Ollie Smith at 15.
Definitely.
And I think I'd far rather see Hutchison at 12.
Correct.
And that's and then I'm keeping my powder dry, but that's where I feel that those players should be. I think also
two of the issues. It removes two of the issues for the aforementioned 10. It removes two out of position players. It gives Hutchinson a run at 12, gives us an actual fullback. It probably alleviates a lot of the pressure that has come.
I think on reflection, I don't think, and I think I'm going to end up agreeing with Craig. So I've seen what Craig's tweet going on and the discussion Craig was involved with on Twitter earlier this week. I think that the problem with it's not the problem with Blair Kinghorn because it's not his fault. The issue is that Townsend or whoever the other guys, I forget his name, the South African French
AJ Zoha.
That's it. I knew it sounded like something from a Thor movie. They've decided to carry on playing the way Scotland have been playing for the past couple of seasons and just stick Blair Kinghorn in at 10. Now, if you are going to play Blair Kinghorn can play at 10 and is a 10 for Edinburgh and is a very good 10 for Edinburgh, an exceptional 10, Craig, for Edinburgh. But he is used in a certain way and he has players around him, James Lang outside him at 12, that allow him to play differently to how a Finn Russell or an Adam Hastings might play. And we've talked about this previously on the podcast. The problem is not with Blair Kinghorn. The problem is that they're trying to make him be a player that he's not. And they're not. And if it's a development to why Sam Johnson outside of him.
Sam Johnson's the wrong person for him to be outside of him. And I'm not, this isn't disparaging Sam Johnson. Sam Johnson is used to having a Finn Russell or an Adam Hastings inside him who runs flat balls, crash balls, flat passes, right across the front of the defenders, kicks and chips over the top, etc., etc. That's what Sam Johnson's used to. And Sam Johnson is used to running onto a ball at high pace, whereas Blair Kinghorn's used to having someone outside him who's a second distributor. Will take a crash ball now and then, but we'll be looking at Blair Kinghorn breaking the defensive line and taking an offload inside him. It's a totally different way of how Sam Johnson plays, and he plays his rugby at Glasgow, and it's a totally different. And Glasgow's a totally different way from. So trying to force round pegs into square holes is and that's why I got so frustrated this week, because those people who know better and those people who don't know anything all just piled on to Blair Kinghorn. And it's like, Blair, I'm sorry, but, and I'm not going to mention his mother, Johnny, don't worry about it. This guy is working incredibly hard. It's his first full season with Edinburgh at 10, and he's played incredibly well for Edinburgh. And if he's not, he made a lot of mistakes on the weekend. I've got no doubt about that at all. But you show me a Finn Russell when he first started playing for Scotland, he made plenty of mistakes as well. Yeah. So people need to just wind their neck.
I think the difference is, though, that and to be fair, I think the difference is, and probably why people are a bit more judgmental about it, Craig, is when Finn Russell came on the scene. Yes, he made a ton of mistakes, and certain elements of the fan group jumped on him for that,
and still do.
Yeah.
But Scotland's attack was exciting. Scotland's attack went forward. Scotland actually looked like they could score tries.
Yeah, but where was it before? Where was it before when he came along? It was nowhere. And
correct.
So he was going to make a huge difference. Now you've got...
Well, you say that, but then you've got Tom Heathcote, who was a very competent 10, who was parachuted. But no, he was a very good 10 in the Premiership and was considered like a good attacking 10, and he was put in that Scotland team. And yes, he again failed miserably. There's been plenty of 10s that have come into that Scotland team and have looked crap. And then so there was no guarantee. Finn Russell looked amazing at Glasgow when he first came through. There was no guarantee he would go into that Scotland team and flourish. And he did. And he made the attack very exciting, and Scotland played their best rugby with an early era Finn Russell.
Because he had players outside of him that worked to the way that he played.
Correct.
He had Pete Horn outside of him.
Correct.
As a second distributor. And if you look at the game at the weekend, when the Scotland's attack fired, Blair Kinghorn had Rory Hutchinson outside of him. That was, when you look at the tries, they're kind of popping passes to each other, and that should be your 10-12, not your 10-15. I mean, you can do it, you can shift things around, but it's...
The point you make, Craig, about the flat ball is really interesting, because a lot of Blair Kinghorn's mistakes came from that 10-12 channel. And I'm not suggesting in any world that professional rugby players are not able to adjust to each other's passing patterns or style, but a lot of ball from 10 was shoveled, and it wasn't necessarily quality passing.
But he's been asked to shuffle. But he's been asked to shovel, and he's not a shoveler. I think that would be the point that Craig would make.
I think he should take contact at that point. He's a big boy. Go for it. Play his game. Don't shovel.
But the thing is, that's maybe not the game plan. And we talked about this the other week. What we want from the coaches, because we have a limited player pool, is a coaching staff that can plan a game plan around the playing personnel that they've got. And this game plan, the game plan that we played on Saturday night, is not the game plan that suits the personnel that are out there. It doesn't suit Blair Kinghorn. It didn't really particularly suit Ali Price. It didn't suit playing Hutchinson from 15. The coaches have got to look at that and go, right, well, the players we've got now are not the players for this game plan. Finn Russell's not there. Stuart Hogg's not there. Chris Harris isn't there. We need to check out the game plan that we would have for those players, and we need to have a game plan that fits the players who are playing.
Yeah, don't ask people to do what they can't do. I think that's really sensible. And if you want Blair Kinghorn to offer what he can do, give him space, give him time, let him do what he can do, let him break that line, let him. We've talked, Craig. I love when he runs hard from the 10 channel, challenges the 10-12 axis, and really gets that offload out the back. That's brilliant. That's what he offers as his point of difference. He's not a distributor. He can't distribute. His passing has always been poor.
No, I think you're wrong at that. I understand where you're coming from, and I understand he made mistakes on the weekend, and I'm not going to defend his mistakes because I can't. The issue I had was, he deferred back to almost an Edinburgh attack style, and you had that ball getting flicked back for Sam Johnson, and Sam Johnson was either overrunning it or Blair Kinghorn was putting it too far in front of him or too far behind him. And we saw 2 or 3 of those balls that ended up on the ground. And I totally understand that's where people get frustrated when they see ball hitting the ground instead of a pair of hands. But that's this. He needs to adapt to the style that Toony is wanting him to play, I guess. But I guess when he comes under pressure, he then... Well, no, I don't even think it comes under pressure. That must be a move that he had planned with Sam Johnson, where the ball came back to him. But again, if you've got Hutchie, not Hutchie, if you've got Chris Dean, or you've got
James Lang
and Synham who are playing that particular pass on a regular basis all the time. Now, I'm not saying that they should be in the squad. I'm just saying that's the sort of play and they're ready for that ball. Whereas Sammy J, I don't see him taking that sort of ball regularly from Ross Thompson or from Dunky Weir in a Glasgow game.
He hasn't taken any ball from Dunky Weir.
Well, yeah. So it's all I'm trying to say is that I'm not having a go. I'm not saying that Blair Kinghorn is wonderful and everybody's wrong. I do not accept that he is not an international 10, and I don't accept that. I don't accept the amount of criticism that went at him this week, considering how poorly our forwards played.
An international 10 needs to have a skill set where they can distribute the ball. The number of passes that hit the deck throughout this season, now I appreciate it's his first season playing 10, but the number of balls that have hit the ground with Blair Kinghorn passing it is unacceptable for a 10.
But how many times the balls hit the deck with Finn Russell when we're under pressure? And that comes back to Craig's point about the forwards. I mean, you've got Katrina Yoon saying, Kinghorn's better when he has time on the ball and space to attack and play people on, either due to the press of the defence or how others around him played. He looked pretty average at the weekend. Now, I think that's an interesting point, and something Craig's touched on is and we've said this about Finn Russell. Finn Russell looks average when the forward pack are going backwards. When the forward pack aren't getting good, clean ball for the backs, Finn Russell struggles. And we've said that's when he has his quiet games. That's when he tries to force things. And that's when we all spend the next week on Twitter trying to explain why he's actually a genius, even though he's just had a really crap game against France. Do you know what I mean? And I think you have to see, I agree with Craig that I can see Blair Kinghorn. It's hard to rate Blair Kinghorn's performance when our forwards essentially rolled over and had their tummies tickled.
Yeah. I don't think that Blair Kinghorn played especially well this weekend, but there were large parts of that weren't his fault. Like, I wouldn't go as far as to say he's not an international 10. What I think he's not is an international 10 in that system. That system doesn't suit him. It wasn't doing him any favours. The forwards were going backwards. He cannot shoulder all the blame. He wasn't good, but it wasn't entirely on him.
I tell you what he is an international 15 in that system.
But that's the thing, though. No, hang on a minute. This is the same people that are pulling him apart for saying he's not an international 10. 3 years ago said he wasn't an international 15.
I'm fairly sure we didn't, but okay.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about I'm talking about you a little bit. But,
I'm pretty sure we did. I'm pretty sure you did say that, John.
I'm sure I can go back. We can go back.
The great thing is we record these so we can go back.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be proven wrong.
What annoyed me about the whole thing, and I'm going to forget about Blair Kinghorn now, which I never forget about Blair.
I often do.
But if Blair was having so much of a mare, why the hell did Ross Thompson not come on at 60 minutes?
Such bad management, by the way.
And when I look at the two different styles of play, and you look at, for example, Finn Russell. If you've got Finn Russell and you've got Blair Kinghorn on the bench, I would expect to see those players come on, because if you're under the pump, especially when you're under the pump like we were against Argentina, you've got these totally different styles of 10. You bring them on to change the game.
My only thought was that the things were going so badly for the forwards that the coaches are thinking, well, Blair Kinghorn can at least handle this, and maybe it's too much to throw Ross Thompson on.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's the right call, but I wonder whether that's part of the
behind
thinking.
a Glasgow pack all season, so he is more than versed in going backwards and would probably have been fine.
The thing is, though, like a Glasgow pack misfiring in the URC
It's different.
is not Test rugby.
I
Like,
know.
how many times have we said that?
I know, but you're never going to find out about. Like, let's put it this way: these guys are going to play the rest of their career behind a Scotland pack. We're never going to have a bomb squad. We're never going to have a South African pack. We're never going to have the level of dominance in the forwards that we want. These guys are going to have to learn to play international rugby whilst going backwards. So,
this is the thing, though, John, and this is what amazed me on the weekend is the fact that we've all talked about this is going to be a development. This is a development tour. This is a tour that we're taking boys out there to blood them, to play them, to let them see what they're going to do. And if we're going to play Rory Hutchison at 15, why the hell are we not putting Ross Thompson in to have a go?
I totally agree, Craig. And actually, I was sitting there at 60 minutes going, this is a joke. Like, he should be getting a game. He should be in there. I totally agree.
You could have stuck Thompson at 10, moved Hutchison in at 12, and stuck Blair Kinghorn back at 15.
Almost like we could have picked people in their actual position.
I was screaming for them to do that from about 55
and
minutes.
I genuinely bet it would have improved. It would have been so much more comfortable. Now, I get we're developing Kinghorn at 10. That's fine. But it would have been better.
Well, and that's why I'm going to go the other way. Why did we not, if we're going to leave Blair Kinghorn on, why don't we bring Hutchie up to 12 and put Ollie Smith on? Was he on the bench?
Yeah.
Was he not on the bench? Sorry, okay, right, fair enough.
Because we didn't have a 15, we had one playing 10.
Yeah. And I guess that's why, and no matter how much we talk about it, I guess that's one of the major reasons that Blair Kinghorn is in the Scotland squad is the fact that he can play and he can be taken to the Rugby World Cup and he can play wing, back 3 or 10. And it's going to provide, it's going to be this sort of...
I think that's really important as long as he is considered in that way. Like, I'm all for that versatility.
Yeah, I'm beginning to think he's not. That's my concern.
Yeah.
My worry is I don't know what... I've got no idea what Scotland's game plan is, having watched that game.
Yeah.
I've got no idea at all. I've no idea what we're trying to do anymore. I don't think the players looked like they knew what they were trying to do. And my worry is, I think it's fine. I'm happy and I would be delighted to take Blair Kinghorn, Adam Hastings, and Finn Russell to a World Cup because all three can offer versatility across the backs, and have plenty of cover to select specialist positions elsewhere and have the luxury of doing that. But I don't think that it's hard because he's supposed to be the cleverest coach in bloody World Rugby, but he's not. I don't think he's got the plan to go, okay, if we're having Finn Russell at 10, this is the style of rugby we're going to go. These are the guys I'm going to have around him to play this way. If Blair Kinghorn comes on, we're going to have to play a little bit deeper. I'm going to need a second distributor with him at 12. Even if that's Finn Russell, I could shift Finn Russell out to 12 and bring Kinghorn on at 10. And we'll just have to change the shape of the attack and we'll call these moves at all. He just seems incapable of doing that. And what it is it's like, okay, Blair, this is how we play rugby. And I know, so on you go. And that's, it's not that fair to ask him to do that if that's, that's not playing to his strengths.
Yeah, no, that's my thing is that I honestly can't put all the blame on him because he's been asked to do things that are not in his skill set and are not something he's used to doing. So I don't think blame it. As we said, me and Josh said the exact same thing about the Georgian referee in the Wales-South Africa game. Him and Blair Kinghorn had very similar weekends where they had not a great time of it at all, but they were put in a position that they should never have been put in, and it wasn't their fault.
But can you imagine though if they worked it out, right? And you've got a Scotland team with Finn Russell at 10 playing 50, 60 minutes of a game of rugby, and it's a tight game, and then 60 minutes you shift Russell to 12, bring Kinghorn on at 10, and completely change just like that. Switch completely different. It's a completely different team now playing a completely different game, and what that would do to an opposition.
Yeah, and equally, you start with Kinghorn at 10 and then you move him to 15.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you've got him and Van der Merwe as two massive strike runners coming out the backfield. You're bringing on a 10 who'll do that.
What was the deal with the wings at the weekend, by the way? Have Scotland forgotten that we have a 6'5" monster who we can actually utilise? Like Van der Merwe was so underused, and we were using Darcy Graham for crash ball, which I love Darcy in the crash more than anything, but when you've got the other guy who's probably double the size of him, that really seemed brain dead.
Yeah. I thought Duhan's defence, though.
Duhan's defence.
That's come on.
Yes.
Leaps and bounds.
Yeah. A year ago, would you have thought that 4 or 5 world-class interventions from Duhan in defence would have been what stopped that from getting an absolute paddling at the weekend?
Yeah.
Because he was phenomenal in defence.
English Premiership has a lot to answer for, to be fair. So well done, Duhan.
That was always the risk with him going down to England and kind of leaving the Scottish system. Is he'd obviously worked really hard since he'd come to Edinburgh on his skill set, and he said in interviews he knew that defence was his weakness, and I think the risk was he goes to England and in that setup, we're not exposed, but I don't think you get developed in this. I'm not sure players get developed in the same way because there's maybe not time to do that as there is to do it with have you work-ons in the Scottish system where you get rest weeks and you're rotated and your time's managed. The worry was, well, he's just going to be flogged in the Premiership and he'll have no time to think every week. And then he'll be up to Scotland for the Six Nations in the autumn tests. But actually, it's rare, I think, for a Scottish player to go down to the Premiership and come back better.
Yeah, I saw him have a couple of phenomenal games in defence for Worcester in the Premiership Cup.
Yeah.
And I was like, it was at that point I was like, if he's defended that well in the Prem Cup, how good is his defending going to be?
Yeah, but the Worcester have had to defend quite a lot this season, so
it's probably a lot of time to work on it.
I can't think of a player a Scottish player that's gone down to England and come back better.
I think Hastings has developed.
Probably, yeah.
Apparently, Matt Scott is now the best centre in the world. So,
what do you mean? Is now? Has always been. Tell you what would sort that whole thing out would have been Blair Kinghorn at 10, Matt Scott at 12, and Ben's at 13. That would have been you sorted. There'd be none of your, just give us the backline, we'd be fine.
Oh, that would be desperate, honestly. Back to the days of counting how far behind we are by the number of penalties Blair Kinghorn's going to miss.
Speaking of which, who's Edinburgh's kicking coach? Because
fired.
Kinghorn and Boffelli were both like about 60% on Saturday night. They were brilliant.
I think it's so. Boffelli has been 90% in the URC.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether it was because I'm absolutely not going to go there with Blair Kinghorn because I know he's kicking. But the thing is, and that's the weird one though, is that he made a couple of kicking mistakes on the weekend, but actually when the chips were down, he put some phenomenal kicks into touch down into the 5 metre.
Are you talking about Boffelli and not Kinghorn?
No, I'm talking about Kinghorn. Oh. But Boffelli, well, you'd have to look at Boffelli. Boffelli was stand out again for Argentina. Whether it was, I couldn't believe. I thought we would be absolutely hammered because of his kicking. I thought if you think of the points he left there,
I would have lost my bet because I had Argentina plus 10. Like so Argentina to win by 1 to 10.
Scab.
And I got it at 2-1. I was very pleased. So if Boffelli had actually been competent, we would have been gubbed. So
Chris Patterson does a lot of the kicking coaching, I think, for Edinburgh and Glasgow.
Yeah,
makes sense.
He's. I think you're stretching it a little bit, saying he wasn't competent. I think on the field he was incredibly competent, and then one of the reasons that we are sitting on the other side of a loss was Boffelli's play, but his kicking was definitely had disappeared. His boot, he must have had a new pair of boots on or something.
I was suggesting his kicking wasn't comcompetent, Craig. His overall play was competent. He was very.
Well,
good.
You weren't very clear that way.
It was better than our wings. Put it that way.
Before we head off to the Patreon special podcast, I should just say that I was delighted, and I think this is down to the work of the podcast, to see that Chris Patterson is no longer being forced to record podcasts in his car.
Yeah,
They've actually taken him to Argentina.
Have they really?
I know. I don't know where he's staying. I don't know
Oh.
whether they've got him in a crate or something like that. Because
Is there a Buenos Aires like
that's down to the work of this
that he's in?
podcast. Our campaign to get the SIU to get Chris Patterson some proper recording space, not to sit in his car in
He's
the
in a
rain, like
Buenos
Marion and
Aires
Jeff.
Steakhouse.
I'm gonna have to do the pod next week from my car or something. I don't know.
Well, see if you can get sent to Argentina.
yeah. Fancy a steak.
No, well, I mean, that wasn't why we were making those rumours, but okay, let's go with it. Yeah, go, Craig.
Yeah. Well, look, we'll no doubt continue the discussion about the weekend's game in the Patreon special podcast. Like I said, if you want to sign up for that, we do an extra bonus podcast every week for our Patreons. It's patreon.com/Scottish Rugby Podcast. You can sign up from £3 a month. For the moment, for this week, and we will be back next week, is goodbye from me and goodbye from Johnny, Craig, and John.
Bye.
Bye.